All right. Well, hello everybody. This is our Between Two Teachers, and Friday, March 18th, and happy Friday. So this is when we bring you the news about education and our opinion about it. So, and there's plenty to talk about. And I am Consuelo Lara.
And I am Madeline Cronenberg, and we begin, as always, with our land acknowledgement. And we pause to acknowledge that we have gathered on the ancestral territory of Hui Chin, which is part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karkin-speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region, and we thank them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland. We offer our respect to their elders and all people of Ohlone heritage, past and present. So welcome. And lots has been going on in education. For the first time, we have even an international story, because once again, because of the coronavirus and the spread of the new Omicron variant in Asia, there's a lockdown of 51 million people in China, and the schools are closed. Schools are closed in Shanghai. They're just all back online until further notice. So we all have to build that in and understand this is, we haven't knocked this out yet. This is not something that's ended. And as much as we were trying to turn the page and move on from it, we're not at that point yet. So the whole issues around masking and testing haven't gone away.
No, not at all. And we need to continue to do that, especially in our schools where you have old people coming and going, and they come and go from their families and their homes. And so in schools, to protect the students and the teachers, we've got to maintain all of this, and staff.
We do. And we need to understand that when we're looking at the children whose families have not felt comfortable sending their children back yet, there are reasons for that, because they're hearing this as well. They're really very conscious of the fact that as much as things have gotten much better than they were, we're not back to where we were before it started.
No.
And that may never happen. I don't know.
Boy.
So there are all those issues, our health issues. Beyond the health issues, and among them, I'll just say, is the mask mandates have been changing. And in California, the mask mandate is moving to mask recommendations. And the mandate for high school and middle school students was lifted and moved to a recommendation. And the elementary school students are going to have theirs lifted in April, after they come back from spring break. And that's the status right now. It just depends on where we all are then. And it's just one of these things where it's very fluid, and we just have to recognize that it can keep changing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. In the culture wars, which are now a regular topic as we look at things, one of the interesting things that happened nationally is the College Board made a decision. And up until now, they hadn't weighed in, but you have these legislators across the country who are limiting how our history classes are taught. And they're saying you can't teach history if it will create discomfort. Well, history creates discomfort, right? The human story is not a comfortable story. So there's no question that if you're going to change it under that theory, that you're not going to create discomfort, you're going to leave a lot out.
What is there to,
How could you teach about Ukraine?
That's right.
How could you say what's going on in the world right today without saying, there's a lot of discomfort here, and these thousands of folks, families that are, that millions that are leaving this country, and thousands who are dead. how do you teach that without discomfort? So anyway, the College Board, who give AP credentials and allow a class to have be labeled as exceptionally rigorous, and also to be able to get college credit for it, and to get a different type of credit on your transcript as colleges are looking at it. They've said that if you're going to pass that kind of law, and you're going to screen this material out of your classes, they're no longer AP classes. They're not eligible to be AP classes.
Oh, interesting. All right. Okay.
That's a big deal. So those legislators, the states that decide to do that, are they just have to realize that this is what they're doing. They are basically dumbing it down to nothing.
That's right. I mean, you couldn't pass any of those tests, those advanced placement tests or anything, if you don't have that content.
No.
Interesting.
No. So that was a big decision that they came up with. Right. So that's a big.
That's a big touch.
That was a big piece of information. The one other interesting thing that happened this week in record time had to do with housing. This is also a higher education conversation around UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley had a neighborhood organization filed a lawsuit and won against the university. And the consequences of this lawsuit, it had to do with building additional student housing. Well, the consequences were that UC was going to have to rescind admission to several thousand students, because they weren't going to be able to have the ability to house them. And a judge ordered them to do that because he agreed with the neighbors.
Oh.
So the only recourse to this situation, and there were a lot of legal hiccups in it. There were lots of little details that created that there was nothing else you could do but pass a law to stop this, to basically stop the judge's decision. And last Friday, that law was drafted and brought forward into the California legislature. Our two representatives, who also represent Berkeley itself, and Buffy Wicks and Ms. Skinner, Nancy Skinner, were involved in bringing it forward. Ms. Wicks gave a very impassioned speech about it. It passed. It did something that nothing else has done. It passed unanimously. And it passed I guess on a Friday, it passed in one house, and on Monday it passed in the other, and Monday the governor signed it. Think about that.
Talk about a fast track, huh?
Talk about what political will.
Political will.
Right? We talk about all the things you can't do. If you have political will, you can do it. And so now the neighbors are going to have, the students are coming. All those people who were told that they weren't going to be able to come because they were going to rescind their admissions, they're all back. Everything is back. Everything is back. So that was a giant story here, right? Because the students had been called environmental pollutants. This was done under CEQA.
I saw that.
Right? And Nancy Skinner said students are not environmental pollutants. And Nancy Skinner has been an environmentalist for years. So that's done. That's done. That was a winner. It was AB once. There were two bills, AB 168, and then the Senate bill was 118. They both passed through and they got signed, and it's a done deal.
Wow.
Then in West Contra Costa, the big news was the county board of education wrote a letter to the local board of education because they had not passed RIFs. They had not voted to reduce their teachers, reduction in force, right? They decided against that. The majority of the board decided against that. So one of the consequences of that was it triggered the lack of ongoing concern letter from the county. And that then brings a whole lot of other things with it. And one of the main things that has to happen when you get a letter like that is you have to start to look for other resources, because what the letter is saying is that you don't have enough money, basically, right? And so you have to figure out how you're going to get more money. And either you're going to get it by assuming your pot doesn't grow and just cutting and just saying we're not going to be able to pay everybody what we were going to pay, or you get it by looking at ways to increase your resources. And there are some bills out now that would increase our resources, but they need to be pushed just like the Cal bill was pushed. So they are bills that will change how we get paid, so that one would be that we would get paid by enrollment, right? We talked about this last time, SB 830, where we'd be paid by enrollment instead of by attendance. And another one, which is not a bill yet, but was one of the governor's proposals, is to look at the numbers that you're paid for by going back 3 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Back behind the pandemic. And that would also boost your resources.
Yeah.
Right.
But do they come in time to save the budget? To save the district?
That's the question.
That's the question. So
that's the question. That's what people are waiting to say. And, you know, and what other resources are there in terms of other partnerships that you can have with within your community, right? And so it's a question of how you do outreach. And Dr. Hurst was talking about, the importance of a moonshot, that every district, you know, that West Contra Costa is going through a strategic plan and looking for ways to do a moonshot. And I believe that the moonshot needs to be looking for different ways to grow your resource base. And that one of the places to look is in partnership with all the elected officials, all of the elected leaders in your community, coming together, talking about what resources each of them is aware of and can partner with you on. So I'm hoping that that's a direction that the district takes to looking at it, besides just looking internally, but I need to look outside.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because those are the people that can advocate and have that line straight to, you know, the legislation, pushing it through, because that example you gave, that's the perfect example, you know. And if we all were in the same place, had the same information, and then put that will together, that political will, it would make a big difference. But there's always been this, you know, the community, politics, and school. There's not.
People aren't seeing them as one when they do see them as one and you are together, that's where your power is, right? And that's how you grow your pot, because the community members feel comfortable and can trust you. And they don't just see you calling each other names and fighting with each other.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that. Then, speaking of that, there's West Contra Costa has brought in an expert on meetings, an official parliamentarian. And in the past, there had been board members or staff members who assumed the role of parliamentarian. Here we have somebody who's from Cuesta and Dunning Parliamentary Services, who is now sitting on the dais with the board members to assist with parliamentary procedures. And so Ms. Dunning gives a monthly report, and she certainly did this month, and she had suggestions and critiques of how the meetings were run and ways that they could be run better and more closely follow the rules of procedure that she's there to enforce. But I just do want to say this. One of the things Ms. Dunning pointed out was that to her, it appeared that because board members had questions, and for whatever other reason, she called out that she didn't feel the board members were prepared. She didn't feel, and she said in her written material and when she spoke, that she felt that they hadn't read the materials and they came to the board meeting unprepared. And that's why the meeting took as long as it did. And I just take tremendous issue with that statement. I think the meeting took as long as it did because they were so prepared. Right? This was an incredibly difficult issue. There were 300 people there. People's future was on the line. And I don't think the fact that they were thoughtful in their deliberations is a sign that they came to the meeting unprepared.
Wow. Wow, that's really something. I mean, I just can't believe it. It talk about unprofessional. That was not professional or appropriate or her role to do that. I mean, you can make the suggestion, maybe the board can, make sure that they have read all the documents or something like that. And especially we know how hard, especially some of the board members work. Talk about doing their homework. They do a lot. And it was just an inappropriate, disrespectful comments.
It really, to me, really was. And when I think about, there were reports given and she was saying they clearly didn't read the reports. No, they did read the reports. They clearly, to me, and I went back and watched it again after I read her report and said, what is it that she thought she saw there that I'm looking at? And as a person who served for 12 years on that board, I will tell you, this was an incredibly difficult set of decisions. And they all listened to what was presented, to the material that came from the president, the CEO of FICMAT. And it wasn't that they didn't hear it, right? It's just that they didn't agree. They came to a different conclusion. And when they applied their values, and this is the other part, I mean, as Dr. Hurst was saying, we have to figure out what know our values. I think our board members know their values. And that vote in particular was to elevate the value of the children in the classrooms, of the young teachers who you otherwise were going to, young teachers of color, teachers in the classrooms that need the most support. That if they had gone ahead and done the vote as the CEO from FICMAT had requested, as was requested by the county, those teachers would be gone. And that wasn't the value of our board.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is not that they were unprepared and incompetent, which is really what she's saying.
Basically, that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Right. And instead, I would just say, Ms. Stunning needs to rethink her role.
Yeah, somebody needs to talk to her about it. Sure.
So I'm only mentioning this because this was done in public. This is a public statement. Right? It could have been done. It could have. There are a lot of other ways it could have been done too, but it wasn't.
But it was public, so we're part of the public. So it's hard.
Right. And the public, and they are looking for this moonshot. As Dr. Hurst was saying, it's important. We're going to do a moonshot, and the moonshot will to do something really different. And I honestly believe that the vote of the board was the moonshot. They're going to have to do something different, but that encapsulated the difficult choice that they had to make, knowing that they were then going to have to deal with the people from FICMAT and all these other agencies about the consequences, but then forcing themselves to have to look for more resources, seriously look for more resources to support all of our children and our community. And now that's what the moonshot needs to be, right? To go out and look for that and not do it the same way. And so my hope is that's what they do. They don't do it the same way. Yeah. Or they're going to be what they avoided was what's happened in other districts. So right now, for the last week, Cotati Roanoke Park has been on strike, and they settled their strike last night. But Minneapolis is still on strike. Minneapolis teachers are out there in the freezing cold, and they've been on strike. I think today's their 9th day of being on strike. And the one thing that happened in Minneapolis is that one of their board members resigned. Wow. And he was a former teacher. And they had been, the union had supported him, and he was, they were picketing at his home, so he resigned. So he's no longer on the board.
Yeah.
So that's a very difficult strike in Minneapolis. And two other local Northern California districts have voted this week to go on strike. And one of them is here in Contra Costa. Mount Diablo voted 93%. They're waiting to see, apparently next week on the 24th, the findings of fact will be released, and then they'll decide whether or not the district and the union agree. And the other one is Sacramento City. They've also voted, and their findings came out. The teachers agreed with the findings of fact. The district did not, so they're still far apart.
Interesting.
And it's all about money, because we underfund education.
Yes, absolutely. That's all what it comes down to. So we'll know more about that next week. There'll probably be a lot of action in that. So
Right.
wow.
Right.
Okay.
But you were out talking about money, right? To our legislators.
Yes, we had the CSBA sets up the legislative week, where you're paired for the county. We are paired with our representatives, and they pretty much give you a script and talking points, and then you can support that with your personal opinions, etc. So and they're all good things. They're all about good, things that support education. So we had, and you've got like 30 minutes. You got to rush through it. Speed dating here. And
Right.
the disappointment, Miss Skinner wasn't there, but her a staff member was there. So we were able to go through, and funding, just like you said, was the number one issue in all the bills around funding. And I thought this was interesting. One of the bills that was brought up, or one of the topics, was about transportation, bus transportation for students, and supporting that. And that was on the list of things that we promote, that CSBA, promotes. But the staff member of Nancy Skinner said that actually Nancy's got a bill, SB 878, which is specifically about bus transportation for at schools. And he said that CSBA said they were against it, to where somebody defended CSBA saying that no, they just have some concerns. But the staff person said no, they told them they were going to lobby against it. So, it's going kind of back and forth, but it's SB 878, and we need to follow that, monitor it, and track it, and see how it goes, and push that along. We certainly do.
The SBA is an interesting organization, because it represents 1,000 school districts, right? And one of the things about that means that many of that 1,000 school, only a few of those 1,000 school districts are really large urban districts, and the rest of them are very small and have different demographics and seriously different needs. And they look at how the education funding pie is cut up, and are always conscious of whether or not they're getting a fair share.
Yeah. Does come down to the money issues.
It does come down over and over to money.
Yeah. So
I actually have a best practice about money this week, because we haven't talked about best practices in such a while.
Yeah.
And the best practice was brought up during the Roanoke Park Cotati strike. Somebody came up and spoke about why his district, where he apparently lives in the Roanoke Park Cotati district, but teaches in Santa Rosa. And what he wanted to do was give a shout out to the Santa Rosa system of being transparent and collaborative with their community around their budget. And they have a budget advisory, a community budget advisory committee. right? And West Contra Costa had it for many years, where we would meet monthly with the CBO and community members, explain, and you would always have access, really easy access to the funds, and to understanding the budget and how the budget works, and understanding then PTA members, community members, staff members, anyone could go to these meetings and then learn what to lobby for. And also be critical of, understand where the budget was going, better understand the special ed budget, better understand all of these budgets. And I think that is the best practice. The best practice is to be collaborative. Then you don't go to war when you're collaborative, you're on the same side.
Yeah, yeah. You're all at the table, looking at the same papers, having the discussion, and know what the decisions are that need to be made, and you're part of that.
Right.
If
You're all on the same team to work for the same kids. That really is the difference. And because the amount of fighting, and you look at these strikes, they are fighting over scraps of money, and the real issue is this with the state, and how much more we need in order to be fair to our families and our children.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where we need to go. Yeah,
so I'm pushing for, everybody should have a budget advisory committee, and those folks who serve on those, they need to make recommendations. And then, you work together and bring your legislators in, let them understand, right? Let the people who are on their teams come in, and as Ms. Skinner's staff, they could come to those budget meetings and better understand what the issues are.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great idea. Nope, that's a best practice for sure. That's a best practice for sure.
In privatization, I'll just throw this out, privatization, Oklahoma has now put forward probably the most dangerous privatization bill. They've suggested something called an Empowerment Act. And who it's going to empower are private school parents and homeschool parents. And what it will do is give each of those families $5,800 out of the school district pot. Now, right now, those children are not being educated by the public school system. So they're going to lose $360 million from the public school, Oklahoma public school pot, if this act goes through, because it means 60,000 students more will now be paid from the pot, although they never show up in public education. They're all in the private school sector, or they're at home and being homeschooled.
Oh.
That is an amazing thing. Oklahoma is the leader in this, but what will happen, and what we know is, when these bills are brought forward, then they're brought forward somewhere where there is a very receptive legislature like there is in Oklahoma, and then they move on to all the other.
They do. Yeah. So, oh boy, that's another one.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest one so far, because this is really just saying, well, really, we don't need public education, because then we'll just give it to everybody. Everybody will just get the $5,800, and we'll close our schools. We'll just.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. All right.
Then the updates are that the big solution, the big update is Cotati, where they got their tentative agreement last night, and they're back in the classroom today. That is a big update. And the others that are going to go out are Sac City and Mount Diablo. We'll see what will happen with them. It's very hard to know. Very hard to know.
All right. Okay.
Okay, and now we're time for our shout out. Who would you like to give a shout out to?
I have a shout out for Larisha Martin, who is one of the assistant superintendent here in West Contra Costa. That's probably not her title, but for inviting me to.
No, chief academic officer. That's who she is.
Chief academic officer. There we go. And she invited me to go on these learning walks, which I'm so thrilled that she did, we went to Madera Elementary School and Kennedy High School. And it was so fun because I realized I hadn't talked about instruction in 6 years. And so to observe in the classroom and give feedback, oh, it was wonderful. So there'll be more of those coming up. So that's my shout out to her. Very professional, very well organized, and very, the principals said they learned a lot from it. So I think very successful. Shout out to her.
Fun. That's great. Miss Morton did a wonderful job. My shout out this week is to Miss Wicks, Buffy Wicks, for all of the work she did to pass this bill so quickly, SB 118. She was one of the main leaders in getting it through because, of course, Berkeley is in her district, as it is in Miss Skinner's district. But Miss Wicks is really the one who was one of the main pushers of this, because Miss Wicks, in addition to having Berkeley in her district, Miss Wicks is the chair of the housing committee in the assembly. And that is a very big role for her to have. And she has just called out the neighbors as being NIMBYs. It's a not in my backyard group that she would not allow to undermine the thousands of children, students who were going to lose their admission to UC if the NIMBY group had been successful. So good work, Miss Wicks.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out to her.
And that, we'll see everybody next week on Between Two Teachers.